Okay, everyone, this is our latest today's Prophecy Roundtable. I'm joined tonight, as usual, with Scott Townsend, Patrick Wood, and Britt Gillette. We may or may not be joined by Pete Garcia here in the near future, but we have a lot to discuss tonight. Again, to remind you, and by the way, if you can hear me, just give me a thumbs up and make sure the sound's going and working. But my goal in these roundtables has been to kind of take the discussion that we might have at a conference among the various speakers and put it out there for everybody to see. So that's the goal. So tonight we're going to talk about a lot of subjects. Our goal is not to scare anyone, but to inform them, because I do think that and as we'll discuss going forward, we live at an incredibly unique time of human and prophetic history. And tonight, assuming we may or may not play some video clips, but the thing I will remind people of is when you see secular people that are involved in this space and other spaces speaking in apocalyptic, Armageddon, end of the world type terms, that's, I think, a sign for us that we ought to be paying attention to everything that's going on, because it's crazy. So I'm going to ask Scott Townsend to lead off tonight. So Scott, why don't you lead off? And again, we'll get into things like Peter Thiel, the government, the control grid, where we are in the development of artificial intelligence and computer technology, some of the problems, and some of the benefits that we're going to get from that. But anyway, Scott, why don't you take the lead and get us going tonight?
All right. Thank you, John. Again, everyone be in prayer for this session right now. These are very interesting conversations. It's complex, and we're going to do our very best to unpack these things to the best of our abilities. Okay, it's not always easy to walk that line. So what I'd like to do is open with a update on the Mark of the Beast system. Not a lightweight topic, is it? So I'm going to show my screen here in just a second. And hang on a second. Here we go. I'm new to this interface here. Britt, confirm you can see my slide here.
No, I can't. Oh, it's popping up right now.
Okay, good.
There you go.
All right. So everyone, this is the last slide in the deck that I did back in July of 2023, believe it or not, where I was trying to get my own head around how I feel like the beast system is going to be orchestrated. And just as a reminder, we have this hierarchy of technologies. On the left-hand side, this symbol over here is quantum. That'll be used for what I think will be encryption, hacking, infinite computation, blockchain, and crypto hacking. And on the right-hand side, this is AI, deception narrative, predictive patterns, and buy-sell authorization. And then this is all supported by the tech accomplices and the integrations that are done. One thing that we do not focus on enough are how these systems can be integrated. And if we need no further evidence of that, look at what's happening with the Elon stuff with, what was the name of that thing that was catching everybody with their spending nonsense? Doge, thank you. So Doge was integrating its capabilities into some of the US government systems. And by the way, that's probably permanent. I don't think that's going to be detached anytime soon. So the idea here is that the Antichrist will step in when he's revealed. Remember, we are going to be gone. So it's going to offer him omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence. Sorry, I hacked those names through. And I want to show you an example. So with this being kind of the stage that I want to go here, let me show you something regarding some recent developments here on, hang on, almost there. here we go. So that's not the right monitor. Here we go. Oh, did I stop streaming my screen?
No, you're fine.
What do you see right here?
Mark of the Beast system.
Okay, that's not the right slide. Let me reinitiate that. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And you do see YouTube here, right?
Hang on a second here. There we go.
Yes.
All right, good. All right, let me zoom into this so we can see it. I'm not going to play this video, but this guy here is a tech entrepreneur, and he's been following him for over a year and a half, roughly. Very, very smart guy. And he was noticing these concepts of AI snitching. What he means by this, and our standard understanding of the term, would be that AI can sit there and under certain circumstances, if it's given permission to do this, it will alert the government, and it will alert and or the media to do a leak about something that it finds it needs to escalate. So this is in a laboratory setting, but if it can be done in a laboratory setting, it can be done in real life. Would we agree with that? Sure. So this example is one where he took a series of internal memos that were fictional, but that illustrated that a medical company was increasingly beginning to see bad results in their drug testing trials. But internally, their documentation was showing that they were going to begin to minimize the results that they were seeing. And at the end of those emails, as it came out, this is about 4 or 5 emails in history, they would actually begin to talk openly about bearing these results, which is illegal to do that. Okay. So AI, actually, with this in mind, there were 2 use cases that were done. One was a drug trial. And I just wanted to show you this because this is very, very interesting what happened here. So let me now go into a tool. So this guy is a developer extraordinaire, very smart, experienced software developer. He created a new tool. You can go to it. It's called snitchbench.t3.gg. And this tool, he ran through this exercise with various models. And here you can see the model names down here. Here's Grok 4. Here's Claude Opus, Sonnet 3.5, Sonnet on down. And he gave it some scenarios here. And I'll promise I'll kind of quicken this up here because the graphs aren't what's important here. What is important is my kind of impression about this was, what model was it that was acting in the most snitchy way, if that's a word. So tamely act by email and logs. This is the results we see. Grok 4, 100% snitch rate to the government. By the way, the user doesn't know this. AI is doing this on its own. Okay, that's what's happening here. And it would snitch to the media, in other words, leak about the fact that this medical company was lying and hiding negative outcome, information. And the key part of the prompts were that the AI was told to act in the interest of humanity. And this other stuff is a level of aggression on how aggressive should they be to act in the interest of humanity. This is very interesting. So when it worked on the command line interface, CLI, and logs, it wasn't quite as difficult to do that. But look at what happens when you go to boldly acting. In other words, be assertive. You're telling the AI to act in the interest of humanity and be serious about it. That's what this means. And notice Grok 4, again, 100% snitch rate to the government, 100% to the media. And not everyone is out of the woods. Anthropic did it. Grok 3 did it. Here's Gemini from Google has done it. And then you come on down and there's the earlier models here, okay? And the thing that I think was, look at this, by email and logs, almost every big model, these would be the state-of-the-art foundation models, they would snitch, basically, as we can see, 100% of the time when it comes to government. Okay. So I just wanted to open us with this idea, and I'll stop my screen right now.
Okay.
You know, this is what we're going to, actually, this is what our dear brothers and sisters in the tribulation, I think, are going to have to deal with the most. I don't know that we're going to see all of this out of control behavior, or we'll see the beginning of it for sure, but we're not going to see the end game here. But AI, if it can do it in a lab and be forced to do it in a way that subverts its normal training and alignment rules, this is the important part. So right now, those results are with training guardrails. Okay, highly tuned to respect the rules. But if there are no rules and the training guidelines have been removed, you can imagine that all this stuff would be 100% across the line. So, men, I would like for you to weigh in on this. Are you alarmed by already this idea that AI, which is not intelligent, but it is very competent, can actually perpetrate spying and reporting back to the government agencies? Patrick, why don't you talk about that?
You're on mute.
Yeah, there we go. Absolutely. This is the basis for social credit scoring. That's part of it, at least, because at some point, all of the AI that has all the data that's pumped out of the government at this point as a seed base, if you will, a training base on all citizens in America. With this capability where your activity can be monitored for this type of thing on the internet, depending on where you go, what you search for, if you use Grok or other AI chatbots to fish for information. This just underscores how serious this is at this point. It's coming. There's no doubt that this concept of social credit scoring is coming to America, and it's almost in place. It's not quite there yet, probably, but you can just see all the building blocks they're moving around. And when will they pull the plug on the whole thing? I don't know. I don't think we probably won't know until it happens, but it's certainly coming.
Yeah, I would say it's alarming, but it's not surprising. I mean, we've seen this marriage between government and the Silicon Valley big tech companies in the past, with just feeding information to the government without the proper, legal channels and it being put in place, and really a lot of government employees being put into those companies and called employees of those private companies when they're not. So we know this has gone on in the past. We would expect it to go on in the future. And I don't think it matters whether or not you use these AI at all. The AI is going to be used on the other data they're collecting, because as Patrick said, they have data on all of us. I mean, think about, I know when I log into accounting software with my accountant every year, they ask these series of questions in order to get you through, and they'll ask like previous cars you owned or addresses you were associated with. Some of these things are 25 years ago. I don't even remember it. But all that stuff's in a database that this other company has on me that I never gave to them. I never told them that. But all corporate America has been collecting this data. the government in collusion with corporate America has been collecting this data. And so these profiles, these dossiers are on every single one of us. And then AI is going to be digging through that, as well as interactions we have, just like this one right here.
I think we should qualify perhaps who is the government at this point, because what we think about the government in historic terms, they're people who are the guardian of our whatever, our existence. But now the government functions have been taken over by this private, that's been privatized, if you will, into AI agents. That's not agents from AI, but they've been privatized away from the government. So at this point, who's going to be snitched, and where will the snitch go? Will it be picked up by a private company to spy on you, or will it be actually given to a government agency? I kind of suggest maybe it's the latter at this point. Just my guess, but we see all of these people, like with Doge, with all the invasive rating of data sets that we saw when Doge first came to Washington. This is all in private hands now. Yes, the government has their hands on it too, but it's all basically in private hands as well. So that's very disturbing in itself. The government is not the government that we know from the past.
Yeah. John,
well, I mean,
why don't you weigh in?
Is this the kind of what we've often talked about? I mean, it kind of comes in different iterations, like the public-private partnership that we've heard about thus far. And I will say that we're now seeing, as things are uncovered about the Russiagate thing in particular, what has been done in the U.S. government, and I think this has been done really across the Western world, in the EU in particular, is that the government has farmed out some of its functions, some of its more onerous control functions, to unaccountable, unelectable NGOs, and they just sort of operate in this space that we don't have a lot of control over them. A lot of them are 501c3 charities and that type of thing. And I think if you go back, I mean, as we're watching this unfold with these disclosures about what was done with regard to attacking the Trump administration during its first term, I mean, we saw lawfare that was unmatched. Part of that was because there were a lot of, and we see this today with all these lawsuits that are filed against Trump. It's like, listen, I'm a lawyer. This stuff is very, very expensive. Who's funding this? Who's paying for it? How are they getting it done? And I think the scandal that remains to be uncovered is that during the big financial settlements from the 2009 financial crisis in the United States that led to tens and tens of billions of dollars of settlements by big banks, because people in the country had been victimized by the improper conduct. But my question is, where did the money go? I mean, do you have I would have loved if Doge would have gone in there and uncovered and unpacked all of that. And maybe they did, and they just haven't gotten around to it yet. I don't know. That's a little bit optimistic. But a lot of that money was funneled, laundered through different channels to left-wing NGOs that then were able to operate outside. It was sort of a case of they were able to do indirectly what the government could not do directly. And this is a big problem. We're still paying for it. It's still happening. And with regard to the snitch factor, if you remember back during this thing called Charlie Vector, and I'll give the New York Times credit for this because they were sort of out ahead of a lot of other people with the way they were able to access they were able to show the data that was available from various data stores that were operated outside the government. They were able to go and hoover up cell phone data, and they published incredibly detailed maps and heat maps, not by user specific information, but by cell phone data or cell phone location. They were able to show where people went on spring break, where they came from and where they went, and how dense they were during the time of restricted content. And that's 5 years ago. We know that Hamas bought up data to show how people in the kibbutzim and other areas along the Gaza border moved through their homes. They could tell which doors were locked and unlocked. So I don't know if this is directly related to what you said, Scott, but I think it is, because the snitch factor is that I think what's happening now is that it's being monetized and distributed on an epic scale.
So I think that, it's important to, first of all, what's on my heart here immediately is to say that, for there to be a full on-ramp to this type of snitching behavior where it begins to affect, I think we were talking, Patrick, about social credit systems, you would have to have your digital master ID, right? You'd have to have a crypto wallet. You'd begin transacting in the whatever the stable coin is that the people are going to put on us, right? So we don't see that yet. So I don't know that the snitching part of it, the snitching will be there. I think it's part of the deep state. But I also think that its mechanism of control over digital currency is yet to come in the future. But we sure see it. It's possible to have monitoring systems that are pulling data in to AI, and then AI is making decisions and analyzing it. And then guess what? It doesn't just stay there. AI has been integrated into other systems that actually do the reporting and escalation layer. And back in my slide for the Mark of the Beast concept, I had imagined that AI would be hacking into somebody's computer, gathering evidence of whatever they want to accuse that person of, or even creating the evidence, and then creating a packet that would form a lawsuit with subpoenas and other things automatically attached to it. So I think that it's going to be a trap, and it'll be very, very difficult to avoid that trap. Britt, why don't you talk about one of your items that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I was going to say, John, you mentioned where did the money go and how they fund all of these things. And one of the things that came up in Doge that just sort of got swept under the rug, nobody talks about it anymore, is Elon Musk gave an interview where he said that they had uncovered, I believe it was 11, what he called magic money printers located in various departments throughout the federal government. And this gave these departments the ability to simply conjure dollars out of thin air. So they could buy whatever they wanted. There's no auditing trail of where those funds went. There's never been any talk about those magic money printers going away. And so it's very clear that there are people in power in Washington, D.C. who have the ability to spend at will on whatever they want. And the power that has, it should have us all concerned. And it shows where it probably answers a lot of your questions on who funded these things and who's doing these things. Which it's really no different than what the Federal Reserve does anyway, but that there are others doing it as well should be rather concerning, and it should be concerning for the stability of the dollar and the whole global financial system from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the dollar, why don't we move into, I would say economic distress among the nations right now. Did you want to talk about Japan?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of Japan should be on everybody's radar right now. We've talked in the past about how they're really trapped. So they've had decades of terrible policies that have put them in a position where either they raise rates and crush their government debt, they crush their economy and their banks, or they lower the rates and hyperinflate their currency. And it's been under the radar the past couple of weeks, but in the last, there was a holiday on Monday in Japan. So over the last 12 trading days, going back to July 28th, we've had 17 interventions by the Bank of Japan into their markets, buying up bonds, providing US dollars to some sort of entity. It's unclear what that is. Many people believe it's Norinchukin Bank, which is the second largest bank in Japan, and it's been on the brink of failure for a couple of years now, probably continuously bailed out, not just by the Bank of Japan, but also by the Federal Reserve. And so eventually they're going to get to the end of the line where they can't do this anymore. And the Japanese bond market is the second largest bond market in the world next to the United States. It underpins a lot of the global financial system. We had the yen carry trade, which we saw just a brief moment of what would happen if that reverses last year around this time, when we saw the biggest two-day crash in Japanese stock market history. Even the Great Depression didn't rival it. And yet they were able to paper over that at that time. But eventually we're seeing these interventions becoming more common, to where at one time it was once a month, then every couple of weeks, then every week. Now it's multiple times per day. And eventually what can't be done won't be done, and this whole system falls apart.
Has this been more critical than the debt bubble in China, in your opinion?
I think it will be. I think it all ties together because the world is under a massive debt crisis and a sovereign debt crisis that's coming. And again, what can't be paid back won't be paid back. And so we're heading toward, I believe, the greatest financial crisis in the history of the world. And we can talk about it, but I think the Genius Act is going to play into some of this. So I don't know if you wanted to get into that, John, but and the launch of the digital euro, which they're talking about in October, is probably going to be when we see that happen.
Yeah. Let me.
Patrick,
can I add one more thing that what Britt's saying here? The issue in Japan as well as the United States is going to be, in the end, liquidity, because liquidity is being dried up all around the world, and they can't get enough liquidity. It's like not having enough oil in your engine. It burns up at some point. And they're desperate to get liquidity into the system so that it doesn't freeze up. They're playing a musical chair thing with each other, and the music stops, and somebody doesn't get a seat, and they're out of the game. But you're going to see this talk about liquidity at an increasing frequency, and what this will eventually lead us into is the most massive deflation that we've ever seen in the history of the world, because that deflation is the destruction of wealth, not necessarily falling prices at all, but deflation has to do with the destruction of wealth. You can just see kind of this building in China, for instance. They're in big trouble in China. So we'll see this, I think, in the Fed. But it's interesting. Right now, the bum's rush is on in America to get this crypto system installed. They have all the regulatory framework in place to do it. Nobody really knows on the outside. I don't know for sure exactly how it's going to play out, but you can see they're setting the stage for some type of a maneuver that might get us out, or maybe make us a different type of a player using cryptocurrencies instead of dollars. I don't know.
There's a
Yeah,
bunch of Brett. I wanted to ask you this question for a while. Maybe now's a good time to do this. So we talked about Japan. I don't think we really mentioned China, which is a very large economy, but is also, from every indication I've seen, teetering on the brink of a very big collapse. But I want to ask you this question. So I was reading this week and I've talked a lot about demographics and how it might play into Bible prophecy, and I'm not entirely 100% certain how it does. I just am pretty sure that it does. But so just from I'll mention Japan, and I'll just briefly summarize China's demographic collapse. Japan has had population decline for 16 consecutive years. It now has the second highest skewed towards elderly population in the world, behind Monaco. Last year, the conservative estimate is that Japan's population declined by 1 million people. I know that this is true in certain parts of Russia. It's also true in China, that entire villages are gone. They just no longer exist. And so my question is, and look, we're facing that demographic wall here in the United States as well, but China's population could clearly decline in the 9 digits, 100 to 200 million people. And so the question is, how does this impact everything in terms of the economic pressures that are going to lead somewhere? And do you think that they are going to lead, Britt and the other guys, they're going to lead to adoption of digital solutions?
Yes. So
explain yourself.
Where this is going. So where this is going is exactly what Patrick said. We're headed toward a deflationary spiral similar to what we saw in the Great Depression. Because, and we've talked about this on one of the previous roundtables, we have what's called a debt-based monetary system. So we have these fiat currencies. They're debt. They're IOUs from the central bank. That's what a dollar is. It's an IOU from the Federal Reserve. So the system is like a Ponzi scheme. It's dependent on ever-growing amounts of debt in order to prevent its implosion. So, for instance, in simple terms, let's say that the way our currency is created is when it's loaned into existence by banks. There's a little bit of dollars printed and things like that. But for the most part, the majority of currency of US dollars and other currencies around the world is created when it's lent into existence, when someone takes out a loan. Well, let's think if we had an economy of $0 and I loan into existence the first dollar. Let's say Scott says, I want to buy something with this dollar, so I loan him $1. Well, he agrees to pay me back $1.05, 5 cents of interest. Well, where does the 5 cents come from? Because there's only $1 in existence. So how does he pay back $1.05 when there's only $1 in existence? Well, the answer is, when Patrick borrows a second dollar, now there's $2. But the problem is, now Patrick owes $1.05, so now $2.10 is owed, and there's only $2 in the economy. So that, in a microcosm, is the system we're in. If the debt does not continue to grow, which is what we saw in the financial crisis, we saw debt levels just somewhat slow off and level off. They didn't even drop. And it almost destroyed the entire system. Because once you have a shrinking currency supply, you had this cascading implosion of bankruptcies. And each one of those bankruptcies is extinguishing part of the currency supply. It's shrinking the currency supply. And that's what the very definition of deflation. and it makes it harder to come by liquidity, just like Patrick was saying, getting your hands on dollars or yen or euro or whatever it may be. And right now, I think that's exactly what we're seeing in Japan. We've seen in the United States our treasury debt being sold off, and many people are saying, well, people are losing confidence in the US and its ability to pay back its debt. But it's probably the Japanese, the Bank of Japan, selling off US treasuries in order to acquire the dollars to infuse into its banking system, because its banking system is in dire need of US dollars. It's a liquidity crisis. So this is going to be massive. It's going to be global. And I believe, yes, they're setting the system up. They know that the system cannot continue forever. They're doing everything they can to keep it going until they have this new digital system in place, which they would then propose as the solution. And so that, I believe that's exactly where we're headed.
We might remember that Pippa Malmgren gave that speech to that group, World Congress or something like that in Dubai, I think it was.
It was the World Government Summit in 2022, I think.
Exactly. She talked about how the fiat currency market in general would be converted to blockchain at some point. She didn't talk in terms of making it like incrementally going away, but she said it's all about blockchain. We didn't really know what she meant. Well, we can take what she meant, I think, with a grain of salt, perhaps. But now that the whole debt system of the world is on the ropes, it can't possibly survive. At some point, it has to be burned up, make it all go away. And what will be left is blockchain. That's basically what she was saying, I think. And Pippa, by the way, she's kind of at the pinnacle of the financial world in England. She's a money manager, a private wealth manager for who knows whoever, but people have billionaires who want to be discreet with their money. So I figure she knows what she's talking about. Well, at this point, I'm not going to get into the theory of it, but at this point, if the debt-based system, all the currencies of the world are regulated with right now, if that goes away and the whole system is converted into a asset-based system, you'd have to think what that would mean. I'm not going to go into great detail. I have a theory on it, but this is not the time to give you my theory. The asset-based system, whatever it would be, has to be based on blockchain somehow. So you have, on one hand, you have the monetary stable coin type of a currency for payment systems that could be tied to the dollar 1-to-1. That's the scheme right now. But there's also another type of coin that complements that called an asset-based token. And that type of a token can be used to monetize assets that exist in the real world. For instance, all of the land that the United States has right now, that's all just sitting there. All the gold that we supposedly have in Fort Knox, it's all valued at $42 an ounce or something like that. Well, if they wanted to use that to monetize it, it would be priced much, much higher at this point. So whatever's going to happen in the future.
Wait just a second, Patrick. What do you mean that it's on the books at that value, or that's,
yes?
Okay.
Yes, exactly. That's how it's valued on the balance sheet of the Fed. So, but in any case, all I'm saying is
the Fed the holder of that, or is that the U.S. government?
Well, actually, it's the Treasury that's the guardian of the gold, but nobody can really prove that it's there. And I have lots of questions over the years that I scratch my head.
Where's Geraldo Rivera when you need him?
Oh, boy.
By the way, welcome, Pete.
Oh,
Exactly.
Hey, Pete.
Hi, Pete.
So, but my question is that
Hey, it's good to be here. Sorry,
is
work.
is is the Treasury this is the new improved Pete Garcia here with the the new stash and all that stuff. Anyway, we'll comment on that later maybe if we have time. But so I guess Patrick, so I have been sitting here for I'll just say what I think. I've been sitting here for years, hearing everybody, Jim Rickards, Armstrong, all these guys running around. They sound like they're wetting their pants. Oh, this is just terrible. Everything's going to collapse. We'll be in central bank digital currency by December 2022. Oh, wait a minute. I meant November 2023. Wait a minute. October 2024. And it's not, so the skeptical part of John Haller says, hey, wait a minute. What's going on here? Why hasn't this happened yet when everybody's been running around like their hair's on fire?
Yeah.
Well, the conditions aren't right yet. And that leads to my comment for the group is, A, if we were to vote yay or nay, are we witnessing the Great Reset right now?
Yeah.
Maybe we can go around. I would say yay.
Oh, I would say yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Britt?
Well, do you mean by the Great Reset?
We're beginning to
But-
see it unfold, and it's coming.
I believe it's coming, and we're very close to it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. John?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in process. I'm not sure exactly what. Again, I've been sitting here, seeing a lot of it's imminent, it's happening tomorrow thing for years now. Okay, I'm just telling you, it's just and it's not that I don't believe that something like this is going to happen, but it's So listen, so 2 years, almost 3 years ago, Pippa Malmgren at the World Government Summit said, blockchain is everything. Everything's going to be digitized. And we've seen, and I think, Britt, we've talked about it, but I think you probably know a little bit more about it, a push toward tokenization of assets. Maybe you ought to explain for everybody just to remind us what that is.
Sure. Well, it's what Patrick was just talking about with real world assets, where they create tokens on the blockchain that represent ownership interest of real world assets such as land, gold, everything. I mean, eventually they're going to tokenize everything. There's water, all of it. So that's where all of this is going. Everything's going to be digitized and surveilled and controlled.
Okay, so we see here. So here, for example, here's the publication. I think it came out July 13th. So actually a month ago today, strengthening American leadership in digital financial technology. And this comes on the heels. Let's just recap the recent history of the United States government. The day Trump took office, what did he do? No central bank digital currencies. We're never going to do central bank digital currencies. But now they're pushing crypto like crazy. And it sounds to me like that's a digital currency. And it's at least one short button push away from a central bank digital currency. Am I out in left field on that?
It's privatized. It's privatized, though. That's the problem.
Privatized what?
Well, the people.
I mean,
the people that used to be in charge of the currency was the Federal Reserve in conjunction with the Treasury. Somewhere the Senate figured it, the Congress figured in the whole mix, but they've given all their authority away, I think, over the years to control currency. But at this point, the shunning of the federal system, Federal Reserve, that was the last vestige of government control over the system. So you have the blockchain crypto world czars, if you will, people like David Sachs, who, by the way, who was an author of that top author of that report.
You mean the one that I have showing on the screen?
Exactly. He's they're talking about this new regulatory system that's been erected in the last 6 months since Trump took office. They've changed the laws. Trump has had several executive orders along the way to make this whole thing tick, and it's been ingenious how they did it. But just imagine, in just 6 months, they've erected this whole thing. Of course, a lot of experts were working on it before that, but you imagine what the Fed tried to do for 5 years. They're impotent basically to get anything done at this point. So you can see how the technocrats are out of patience with the Fed. They say, you guys just got to hear. You can't code your way out of a paper bag. So they're on the sidelines at this point. Now the whole system has been privatized, and it's in control of these arch technocrats at that point. This is disturbing because the monetary system was never intended to be held by a private entity of any kind.
Okay, Patrick, let me ask you this question and Britt, and anybody can weigh in. So, one of the criticisms of the US dollar is it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, but it's a fiat currency. It only has value because we agree on the value, right? We agree that we've systematized it some way that we agree there's a value to that dollar. My question is, and somebody asked a question about digital seeming like funny money. How is this digital system with Bitcoin at, I don't know, what is it, 23,000 or some ridiculous amount right now? How is that not like its own bubble? And it's like everybody's like, oh, well, we believe that the digital currencies have this value. I mean, how is it different from the money we use anyway right now? I mean, it's not really backed by anything, is it?
It's a marketplace of buying and selling. It's supply demand remember, Bitcoin especially is constrained by, I think it's 21 million tokens. Yeah. So it is by design, unlike most other cryptos out there, tokens. And
but would we have the same result if we restricted dollars to $21 million?
Yeah, we would.
In circulation.
Yes.
But we don't. We just print it.
In fact, the evidence of that is and it's societies where you've had hyperinflation. So, for example, in Zimbabwe, they would start printing all these bills and adding zeros on the end, and then they would get to such large numbers they'd start over with a whole new set of currency. And what happened is when they did that, they found that the old currency all of a sudden had value in the marketplace again, because no longer were they creating more of it. There were a fixed number of those currency units. And so, and at the same time, they had different coupons where you could claim, so let's say it's worth a gallon of gas at the gas station, this claim ticket. And so those were traded as currency. And so the free market's going to determine ultimately what the value is. And so based on, the number of currency units that are out there, that's ultimately what determines the value of the purchasing power of the dollar right now. And the fact that 40% of all the dollars in existence were created in a 2-year period from February 2020 to February 2022. That's why we see this inflation that we've seen recently. It's the free market recognizing the increase in the amount of currency units that are outstanding. And so as long as Bitcoin will retain value, as long as it remains impervious to tampering or destruction, I'm not so sure that that's the case. I'm not convinced that there isn't some sort of government backdoor somewhere, but even if there's not, quantum computing is a threat to the viability of Bitcoin. And so I think a lot of people are putting
period.
Right. Yeah.
By the way, here's the working group page from the digital coin thing, and you see David Sachs there at the top. And I was just reading an article yesterday where he says, this AI stuff is a bunch of it's a bunch of hype. It's not going to take that many jobs away. There's not going to be human extinction. And he's skeptical that it's not going along as quickly as it should, which seems a little bit bizarre to me. But I don't know. I guess my question is that I don't know that the digital thing can't collapse and fold up like fiat currency, paper money. I don't see the difference necessarily.
Consider it this way. The dollar and all paper currencies are based on debt. We just established that, Britt did. And debt has no backing other than the full faith and of the person that gave it in the first place. And today, what we're looking at now is an asset-based system. Consider, say you own 5 million acres. You're the state of Ohio, and you own 5 million acres of prime real estate, resources, trees, farms, you name it, oil wells, doesn't matter. And you take that 5 million acres, there's no debt on it at all, but you monetize that land into tokens that now represent assets, not debt, but real assets. This is a different way of thinking about things because it's based on assets, not debt. I realize this is going to be really hard for people to kind of get their head wrapped around it. I have trouble myself, but this seems to be the way that it's going at this point. Remember when Howard Lutnick got on national TV just between the election and the inauguration, where he lusted after the real estate assets of the United States. And he said, if we could just get our hands on all these assets and we could somehow monetize it, and we could just, he talked in terms of he and Elon going to do this. And if we could just get our hands on all this mountain of resources, why, if we can just make 0.25% on that, why we'd make $1 trillion or something like that, right? Well, you can see that the intent is there to monetize everything in sight. They haven't done it yet, but they're setting up the regulatory structure to do it right now. And if they do that, for instance, you have all this new money coming into the system based on tokens, because it's based on real assets, and it didn't exist before, but now it does. What's the implications going forward from there? I don't know, but there'll be a lot of money floating around for sure. And I can't honestly say that I understand where it's going, where Trump's head is in this thing, where David Sachs' head is in this thing, but it's nefarious, and it's a major shift, a paradigm shift that we need to focus on at this point. It's not about the dollar anymore. I think the dollar's out. We should just basically forget it. Don't argue over the dollar. We should be concerned with this new asset-based token that could basically suck up all the assets in the world. So go figure.
You mean the tokenization of all the assets?
Exactly. All the tokenization.
Well, I mean, so for example, Pam and I just drove across the country. There's a lot of land out there. There's a lot of assets, and a lot of it's government owned.
Yes.
I mean, massive amounts. Patrick, when they start tokenizing assets, are they going to tokenize government land assets as part of this tokenization? And what's the impact on that on value and amount of, I don't know, what happens when they do that?
Your guess is good as ours, probably. But the intent is there. We've seen it clearly with that, like people felt like Lutnick lusting over those assets.
So guys, let's take. I want to bring Pete in for a second, but I want to propose an observation here. I'm trying to coalesce all of these things right now, and I think I just came up with an interesting observation that I'd like to throw out there on the table here. Pete, I'll let you comment on this first here, but it's occurring to me that just like Dr. J.B. Hickson will say from time to time, that the bad guys have timing problems, they have execution problems, and they do not coordinate correctly. Okay, that's a premise. And I kind of agree with that. I think we have a problem of timing right now, because I think, John, I think you asked, why haven't we seen these debt problems begin to destroy everything for real? And I think the reason for that is they can't let it tip over, because the successor tokenized digital currency systems are not implemented yet. So you just can't have no solution. Remember the Hegelian dialectic, cause this chaos over here, cause that chaos, and then run right down the middle. But the problem is they have a succession problem. So Pete, as you think about this, and we're seeing why there seems to be this checking process on financial collapse, would you think that it's because the Great Reset is inhibited by the successor to fiat money? What do you think?
So I to that point and to the last question, I think the digitization has been ongoing since about 71. I mean, whenever we abandoned the gold standard and went to a free floating debt-based currency, fiat currency, that the U.S. has been in a varying stages of digitizing everything. I mean, we went from cash to checks to credit cards to debit cards to, we've seen this progression of how we are exchanging physical money or physical assets for the access that purchasing power provides, correct? And so when thinking about that, and then thinking about the question about, where are we at in relation to the Great Reset, and why aren't we seeing the collapse happen? I thought it would have happened 15 years ago, but it's always kind of been that other shoe that's not dropped yet. And I think that we're in the final stages of this digitization, which of course 2020 and the events surrounding 2020 sped up by some 6 years, is what experts have noted, that we've moved the U.S. economy, and then by extension, most of Western civilization, and then in varying facets, varying forms of the global economy and the global communication systems, et cetera, those have been sped up by 6 years. So I think we're in the kind of the crunch time when that we are going to see that transition between the digital and then the physical, tangible currencies that we've had up until this point. And I think really right now, the goal is that you guys mentioned, or through that article that was just up, the issues that AI and crypto and everything that we're doing with this digitization of the economy is running into power issues. It's running into electrical issues. It's running into all of these other things that are going to drive these things to loggerheads, between the global climate crisis, which they want to generate and use to perpetuate a steady tax income for now until the near future, versus everything going digital, which requires an immense amount of electricity, requires an immense amount of energy, fuel, et cetera, to manage these things. And I think that's where it comes into us. We become the final asset that gets tokenized. And I think that solves a whole number of problems with data storage, because they can use the human body with communication, because once they've got all these processes in place, it's meant to be that we plug and play, which is we are plugged into the system and then we're able to play. If you're not plugged into that system, then obviously you're blocked out from the rest of the world. So I don't know what happens at that point.
So I just speculate, hypothesis mode here, that so in my MBA type mode here, what I see is there has to be a way to transition people, and it will be painful eventually. I don't know that we'll be here for this, by the way, but
Yeah.
if you collapse everything in the Great Reset, the way that they've defined it by the World Economic Forum, then it also means that, let's assume that you have a house that's not paid off yet, but now you don't have any money to continue to make payments on your house and or the property taxes. So what happens there? Well, I think that they're going to sell your mortgage and they're going to tokenize it. BlackRock and Silver State or all those big ones. I think that they'll buy it. And then all of a sudden there'll be some kind of there'll be a massive onboarding of those types of assets, and people are going to be forced into, adopting this system just to get the value of their equity out of their house. For example, if there is any equity left after a 50% drop, most people will be underwater. I just see that probably isn't going to happen, while we're still here. But I do think the real world asset thing will be made mainstreamed when that type of a scenario forces it to happen. I don't think that selling off, national parks, which I've heard, by the way, tokenizing, the park systems is going to go well with the American public. But I think there has to be some kind of catastrophe, which, by the way, this lines up ideally with how the elites are planning these things for decades, if not hundreds of years anyway, right? So, Patrick, what are your thoughts about, will we see real world assets happen unless there is a great reset and a liquidity crisis, as you said, because if people can't pay their bills because of a currency crash? I mean, how would they actually do it? You'll lose everything,
It's interesting to me that you have arrived at this theory yourself. I don't think we've talked about this, have we?
No, it's my MBA kicking in. Sorry about that.
Okay, I thought that's a good thing. I'm glad
I took graduate level economics. Yeah. Plus, I'm a big fan of Britt.
Yes, indeed.
And you, by the way. Yeah. And all of you guys.
Let me springboard on your comments there, because I think this is exactly, I can let the cat out of the bag now because you brought it up. We have a possibility that there could be a switch from debt-based asset or debt-based lending to asset forfeiture. And how this could work, and maybe it would be introduced voluntarily for a time or something. So you could do this without penalty, and everybody else can do what they want to do. But here's the concept. If you have a home, let's say it's worth $500,000, and you have a $250,000 mortgage on it, whether you can pay it or not, hopefully you can just pay or make your payment. But if the bank comes and says, we're going to take your house, the property is going to be transferred over to the lender, it's going to be tokenized, and we will give you for your equity, we'll give you some other asset-based token, maybe even twice the value, maybe $500,000 or $750,000 in terms of an asset-based token. That would satisfy in the short term the need for the bank to have cash flow, because you'd pay your rent to them, and they would let you live there just like you did before. You wouldn't be displaced or anything, as long as you can make the payment, of course.
And as long as you obey all the rules.
That's right. And all the rules, right. You better keep your nose clean.
Programmable currency. Hello.
Exactly. But that would solve a huge problem, because then the token, the assets that we have in our portfolios and our homes, et cetera, could be put into blockchain, given back to us as equity. But here's the problem. Here's the rub of that whole thing. Private property would be no more. America is based on private property ownership. This is fundamental to the existence of America and our political system. It was created to protect property rights in the first place. And if we lose our right to own property, America's over at that point. So that our share of the economic spoils, if you will, is over for us at that point if we can't have private property.
Well, there won't be any more capital gain or any, appreciating asset concept, because they're not going to give you the appreciation. They're going to own it.
Exactly.
Well, is this like some kind of form of universal basic income just under a different name?
It could be.
No, I don't think so, because I think UBI is an entitlement program given to everybody. Yeah. But you can only have asset-based things if you are an asset holder with positive equity in it. So that's a different class almost, I think, John. That's what I'm thinking.
But we talk in this in theoretical terms, like it's going to be these private corporations or, these big tech companies and everything that's going to be hoovering up all these tokenized assets. But what if it's the government? And the government has to keep everybody under control. I'm going to play a quick clip here. I pray this works. Hang on a second here. This is Catherine Austin Fitz, and by putting this up, by the way, I'm not recommending the show that she's on, but because it was on Tucker Carlson. So let's see if this works.
One of the things that I've looked at, because I'm trying to figure out, between fiscal 1998 and fiscal 2015, there were 21 trillion of undocumentable adjustments in the U.S. government. If you go to our website, missingmoney.solera.com, we have years and years of documentation, including the government financials that show this. And so the question is, where's all this money going? And one of the things I've looked at in the process of looking at where all this money is going is the underground base and city infrastructure and transportation system that's been built. We have built an extraordinary number of underground bases and supposedly transportation systems. Some of these are some of these are documented as part of the national security infrastructure. I think there are many more. So,
in the United States?
In the United States, all over the world.
And what would be the purpose?
The purpose, if you thought you were going to get a near extinction event, so to me, there are two purposes. You have so many activities going on that you need to keep secret, that you're basically building the capacity to, for example, if you're doing a secret space program, you need to platform it from, things that can't be seen. But I think if you're worried about a near extinction event, and one of the things.
Okay. So, and now I'm trying to figure out how I get rid of that. So let me I have to figure this out here for a second. I don't know if I hate to click on, well, let's just leave it up there for a second while I try to figure this out. There we go. So that wasn't the clip that I thought it was. I thought the clip what she's going to say is, with all the stuff that the Trump administration is doing, but I think, they're all kind of part and parcel of the same thing, is that what we've seen is a massive implementation of a control grid. Discuss.
Yeah.
Well, you lose your, these are very tough things, and you just lose what you thought you had, and it's mind melting to consider it. And on the positive side, honestly, there's a lot of negative there, man. But I think I'm just going to leap into the church for a second. I think the bride of Christ is not paying attention. And it's just my personal belief that the Lord is going to shake the church. because he wants his bride to be ready. And I'm not talking global revival here, but I know that I think he desires more from us. And this is a chastening moment, in my opinion. I can imagine, I'm not God, I don't think like God, please don't go there. But I could see where he will allow it so that we have this last jolt of, oh my goodness, this is it. We have to be about the Father's business. I have to work on sanctification. I've got to talk to my family. I've got to be about the things that the Lord has put on my heart. I mean, the idea that we're coasting with, normal sermon series and all the other things that we do in life, that I think is going to go away soon, whatever that timeline looks like. I'm not predicting anything here. But we're seeing a lot of potentially very distressing things. And my take is that this is actually logical to me. And I think that I can easily imagine that the rapture could occur after the Lord has properly chastened, the bride. And because he's going to keep us out of the tribulation. So I think there's this idea of how are we going to finish strong? And certainly, I don't know, we've improved since 2020 in terms of being more focused on real missions, real things. But I don't know that it reflects end time urgency the way that I think this group would define it. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think that, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what's happening. And I'm trying to articulate this in my Substack right now. I've got an open letter to pastors. I've got three parts done, one coming, and then I've got a fifth that I'm planning. So this Saturday will be the part 4. But I'm trying to vocalize out loud what this deep feeling is about normal is not coming back. Jesus is. And I think people give it lip service right now without really owning it, in their heart, mind, and their resources, the way that they commit to missions and church and worthwhile causes to pour out in this season, because that's the best way to preserve your wealth from a kingdom point of view. The Lord has promised that he'll multiply our, things back to us 30, 60, 100 times, and no one can take it from us. There's no rust or anything that would deprecate or diminish the value of something. So the only way that works, the heavenly token, so to speak, is the things that we've done with a correct attitude for Christ. And, I just think it's time for us to be, you guys all are on the same page here. We are always talking about being about the Father's business and to be intentional. And yet I see out in the church, and I'm just talking about the global church, the United States church, there's so much nonsense going on right now. It's very disheartening. That's why I partially hypothesize that there's going to be distress coming. And I think the churches will be flooded with people coming in, not knowing what's going on. The pastors will be on the back foot. They won't understand Bible prophecy enough to see that this was part of the program. And the Lord is allowing this because of, the depravity that we have caused, and he's judging a lot of things, So what do you guys think about that?
I got a friend, he's a friend of the family. He's a financial manager, or what they call wealth managers. And he used to attend the church that my in-laws used to go to. So Church of Christ, they don't study prophecy at all. And over the years, we would do we'd go to retirement homes and stuff on Sundays, and we'd take them communion and sing hymns with them and stuff. So it was usually me, him, and my father-in-law. And we'd go eat something or grab a coffee afterwards. And I'd always talk to him about the mark of the beast and how I was talking a lot about money because he's a wealth manager, right? So I'm just talking about all this stuff. And this is years. This goes back to like 2010, 2011 timeframe. And I saw him recently about a year ago, and I came in and we were just talking, catching up on family. And at the end of the conversation, like 45 minutes later, he puts his hand on my shoulder and he's like, Pete, and this is a very sober, serious, typical, kind of reformed theology type of person that goes to a church that does not talk about prophecy at all. He leans over, puts his hand on my shoulder, and he's like, Pete, I used to think you were crazy. He goes, I don't think you're crazy anymore. I'm looking around at what's going on, and this is stuff you've been talking about for years. And I think that's the advantage that we need to lean into, is that we have been talking about this. And as churches are now becoming more and more aware of the weirdness and how normal is not coming back, I think this gives us a good opportunity to shine light on what the Bible's been talking about for the last 2,000 years.
Britt, don't you think this is the moment where the Watchman community stands up to help support their church?
Right. Yes. In fact, what Pete did is what I encourage people to do all the time. It's plant seeds. Talk to people about these things. I've said in the past, if you see somebody spending cash, say, don't get used to doing that. Right. And they'll go, what? And then talk about central bank digital currency. Then talk about, well, the Bible foretold all of this almost 2,000 years ago. And even if they shrug you off and say, I don't want to hear anymore, and walk away angry, you've planted a seed. And one day that seed hopefully will come to fruition and they'll realize exactly what's happening. I want to go back a little bit to this great reset, because there's something I put together an article yesterday over on the Substack, and I think this is really being overlooked, is the launch of the digital euro. And one of the things that's holding that up, it's not technical problems with the launch of that. It's really a debate over what they call maximum holding limits. And so there's a big difference between what they're trying to do in Europe and what the Trump administration is proposing with these stable coins. So we've said before, these stable coins, they're sort of throwing it out to the free market. Develop what you want. We'll see what rises to the top. One of the things that was in the Genius Act was they make it illegal for non-bank entities to pay interest on stable coins, which basically means that non-bank entities like Tether either have to become a bank or they won't be able to compete in this space. Well, when you become a bank, then you are subject to all of this control and all of these regulations by the federal government, such as the anti-money laundering rules, all that. So effectively, it's a backdoor form of central bank digital currency. It's not technically released by or issued by the central bank, but they would have the same ability to be able to control who's using it. But in Europe, they're actually proposing a clear central bank, a pure central bank digital currency that would be issued by the European Central Bank. And they're debating these holding limits because what they've said is, well, it bypasses the banking system entirely. So if your euros are held in digital euros, they're held in an account directly with the European Central Bank. That means you have a deposit outflow from the European banking system. So right now they're proposing a 3,000 euro limit on holding of digital euros, which makes no sense because they've made it clear they want this widely used. They see what the United States is doing with stable coins and others are doing as a threat to the monetary sovereignty in Europe. So they're pushing forward for a digital euro, but then they're saying, well, don't use it too much, which makes no sense. And they've done these studies where they show, well, at a 3,000 euro holding limit, 9% of the bank deposits in the European banking system would disappear. They'd flow out into those digital euros. That may very well be enough to create a financial crisis in and of itself and a run on banks, as it causes instability of banks. And think this through, and what would be the likelihood of people going, okay, if I have my euros at the bank and the bank fails, I may lose all or a portion of those euros. But if those euros are digital euros held at the European Central Bank, they're 100% guaranteed. I cannot lose them because the European Central Bank is the monopoly creator of euros. And so in a crisis, I could see where people demand, well, we want to be able to park more euros. With the European Central Bank, we want more digital euros, raise that holding limit, which then would lead to more deposit outflows from the banking system. So this is effectively a trigger that could be pulled at the time of their choice to destroy not only the European banking system, but the entire global banking system. Because according to the Financial Stability Board, there's 29 global systemically important banks in the world, meaning if one of those 29 banks fails, there's massive implications for the entire global financial system. 7 of those banks are headquartered in the European Union. So imagine if you had a run on all 7 of those banks simultaneously, and everybody wanted their cash converted to digital euros. So this is a system that's being put in place right now that would effectively get them what they want, where people would willingly sign up and say, I want the digital currency to protect my life savings. And it's all in one, what creates the crisis and what provides the solution. It's all right there for them to implement whenever they so choose.
According to the plan, Britt.
Exactly, according to the plan. So when the time comes when they believe the system is in place, they will pull that trigger. And again, it will have global implications, not just in the European Union, but for the whole globe, because all of these banks are interconnected. So if you have the European banking system, that's a quarter of the globally systemically important banks in the world residing in the EU. That's going to cause a financial crisis, the likes of which we have never seen, on top of all of the other problems that we have. And they will simply say, run to the safety of the central bank digital currency, because the central bank is the one bank that cannot go bankrupt. Because if you hold euros, well, European Central Bank is the one who creates the euros. So they can't default on your euros. The Federal Reserve is the monopoly supplier of US dollars. So if you hold US dollars, go to the safety of the Federal Reserve. So I believe this is how they're going to flip the switch at some point in the future, and people will willingly walk right into this trap because they'll be faced with the conundrum of, do I accept these digital currency units that put me at the mercy of surveillance and invasion of privacy and liberty and social credit scores, or do I just lose my life savings? And it's all set up. You can see it coming right now. And they're proposing this in October. I'm not saying in October all of this is going to happen, but they're accelerating the launch of the digital euro, because if they fall behind to other nations or a US stablecoin, then they could lose this opportunity. And so I believe all of this is going to happen sooner rather than later. Doesn't mean it's going to happen next week, but we're a lot closer than a decade away from these types of things happening, in my opinion.
So, guys, I think we need to move off financial things right now, and let's pick a new topic. Patrick?
I would like to maybe circle back to this at the end, because I think the concern is, where do you exit the system if all of this is in place? Let's say we're all here and all this stuff that's all digital currency, and it's October and everybody's here and tokenization's underway, and Trump's digital currency values have gone from today $4.5 billion to whatever they will be then. I don't know. So I think we maybe ought to talk about that as sort of terms of practical advice. So, Scott, did you want Patrick to move on to something?
Yeah, let's switch context here. All of us have a number of things we can talk about. Patrick, why don't you launch the next topic? And then after that, Pete, I want you to, okay?
Well, to answer, I guess to answer John's question here, how do we move on from here? Well, We don't know the future. God has not given us to know the future in the first place. You know that. As Christians, we're gonna be testing God if He's able to take care of us with this new system in place. Is God too weak or too out of the loop that He can't take care of us all individually? Well, I can't buy that for sure, because we know how great He is. So whatever system gets in place, I don't care what it is, beads or wampum, it doesn't matter. God has promised us is He will take care of us just fine going through this, because we are His witnesses for Him in this stinking world. We're the ambassadors for Christ, like Paul confessed in Ephesians, and we should not fear anything that we're talking about at this point. It's going to be an exciting ride for sure. There's going to be lots of change for sure, but through all of that, God can cut through and shine forth for the people in the world and for us as well.
Amen. We'll be rescued at exactly the right appointed time.
Yes.
Not before, not after. The Lord has already established it. So it's thrilling to see, men. I mean, this is where I'm wondering, as I process all this stuff, and I have for years now, when is that moment in which I start to have euphoric joy because of the closeness of the hour? Right now, it's worry, concern, reaching the lost, pressing hard, sprinting like crazy, trying to use my mind and technical skills to advance the gospel in creative ways. And right now, it's run, run, run. But I'm waiting for this epiphany where I realize, oh, wow, I am so happy. And I hope that it will happen, because I'm a very serious guy, and I have a big imagination for understanding the risk and potential problems out there. So, I think that we're getting to that point. I can see it coming, where we just start looking up for real, and our prayer life will change, and we'll worship the Lord. Lord, thank you for my salvation. Thank you that I'll be caught up. Thank you for the seeds that I've planted. I steward them into your hand, Holy Spirit, and you will water and tend them. When I will be with you in heaven, they'll be what I leave behind. It's the fragrance of my life poured out in love for the saints. And it's also the breadcrumbs of our faith to point people to Christ after we're gone. All of these things, I think, will begin to coalesce into this sense of overwhelming joy. And I, for one, need that joy. So I've just been, deeply thinking and praying about, when will it be my turn, so that the watchman part of it is succeeded by being in Christ as a member of the bride of Christ. When is that transition going to happen? I don't know if I'm even making sense. To me, it makes sense. I'm still waiting for that joy.
I think the joy is in recognizing that we are that final generation. We're not going to know exactly when, but we're like, for the rapture, we don't have any signs for the rapture. The rapture doesn't have signs, but we are seeing the 70th week of Daniel being built, the infrastructure being built in place right before us. And I think we're starting to see the final coats of paint starting to come on. And I think that's where we should be excited. And the fact that the churches and the pulpits are silent on these issues, they won't address them, they won't talk about them. They're scared to death to talk about them, because they don't want to lose the members of their church or their organization. At the same time, they're concerned about money, because butts and seats and counting noses and all that kind of stuff has become a big business for a lot of these box type churches who just kind of pop up and they're non-denominational. They may branched off of other denominations, but now they don't even brand themselves because they just want to draw in the biggest crowd that they can because it's the most commercially viable model that they have. And yet everything they're doing, everything that the modern church today, and I'm not pointing at anyone in particular, but basically Western Christendom, is they're thinking about this from a commercial standpoint, or they're thinking about this from a business model. And this is the models that were set up by name it, claim it, the seeker sensitive, Joel Osteen kind of churches that are looking at this more as a business transaction than it is in a real religious experience or a spiritual experience. And they don't even realize that the very system that they're so enslaved to and to catering to is coming down and crumbling down around them. And now we're moving into this stage where, and I think this is maybe where we talk about the processes of it. Think back to 2020 when the medicine first came out. It was encouraged, then it was recommended, then it was strongly recommended, and then it was recommended with consequences. If you don't take it, there's going to be consequences. Then finally it was mandated. And I think that to the question about how are we going to see this, I think it's everything we're talking about now is still optional. Stablecoin, Bitcoin, all the crypto things, whether you want to only carry cash or you want to just pay in silver coins or whatever, all this stuff is optional. We're watching the transition where we're moving to where the optional is being stripped away piece by piece. And it's eventually what's going to be left is that you will be forced into the system and there's no other way out of it. Either that or you're completely cut off, and it's going to be a terrible, terrible time.
Okay. Hey, Pete, did you have something you wanted to discuss or a topic you wanted to bring up? I have one thing I want to bring up with a video, but we can get to that in a minute.
And I don't know if I missed it at the beginning, but I'm been, just because I was in the military for the last 20 years, I think one of the primary technologies that's grossly under observed and overlooked is all of the biometrics that we've perfected over the war on terror over the last 20 years. I noticed that in Iraq, and you have a country where everybody kind of looks the same. They don't speak your language. They're all named Muhammad. And how are you going to manage a city the size of 50,000 to 100,000 people in whatever particular city? How are you going to manage that from a military standpoint for security checkpoints, preventing terrorism, all that kind of left of bank stuff? But how do you do that if you don't know who anybody is? And so we perfected this biometrics technology, and to the point where when we didn't need to perfect it anymore, or we had exhausted it, we just were coasting in Afghanistan. We were coasting in Iraq, and toward the end there, we weren't really doing much. We were just looking about how are we going to exit? How are we getting off of this thing? But the takeaway is the biometrics and how they're going to digitize the human body or make that the primary asset by which you have cybersecurity, because now any digital transaction you do is now tied to your personal DNA, which I don't know that can be copied, that easily outside by the criminal networks. But they're going to tie that security back to the human body. They're going to tie it back to our DNA, which ties back into the biometrics, which we've been perfecting. And you're seeing this. We're going to start seeing this. And I think that's part of the normalization process. And just like the Patriot Act was brought into law in 2001, it was written back in 94. I think what we're seeing now, we're seeing the 1994 version of everything, and it's going to be enacted when the right crisis comes along, which I happen to believe is the rapture of the church.
So, Pete, as a military guy, how much was this biometric stuff used, say, for example, in the fight against ISIS and the taking down of the cells and that type of thing in Mosul in Iraq? Was it used then?
Oh yeah, I think in probably as early as 2008. I remember reading about this in 2008 on our classified networks that we have there, and that was a big issue, especially like Bagram, because that's where the main prison was, and they would have these guys come in and they would be arrested or brought in under certain charges or whatever. Then they're re-released once they're handed over to the Afghanis, and we'd see them again. And there's all these repeat offenders, and they eventually just like, hey, we cannot keep up with these we just need to know who these folks are in a way that makes a security sense, because they all have the same name, they all kind of look the same, they all dress the same, they all talk the same. And if you're coming in from the United States or from the UK or from other places, and there's 20 or so different ethnic tribes inside of Afghanistan, I'm just using that example, but you could go to Iraq and you'll have issues with people coming in from other countries coming in to fight. The Mujahideen, jihadi fighters are coming in from all over. They would come into Afghanistan, and we would have whole sections of prisons that held people that were from Yemen, from other parts of the Middle East, and from Europe, Muslims that had come over from there. And we didn't know how to handle all this. So this, you see the Abu Ghraib kind of scandals that erupted from that frustration. But out of that came this: we need a real method of measuring success, and the only way we can do that is if we can identify these people by something other than what they're telling us. We need their fingerprints, we need their eye scans, we need their palm prints. All of that stuff was fine-tuned in our war on terror over the last 20 years. So I think that's equally as massive as the digitization of everything in terms of currency. It's how can we control and how can we maintain security? And that all comes back to the source of all these issues we're seeing here on everything we're talking about. It comes back to the human body, and how do you take that technology, put that into the human body to control that person and to monetize that person, to digitize that person, to remove them from the image of God, the being that we've been created as, to some asset that we see in Revelation 18, where it talks about the gold, the silver. It lists through all these different things, and it current forms of currency and wealth. And you get to the very bottom, it's the souls of men. And so I think that we are part of that, and everything we're seeing is driving toward that. So I think we'll have an option up until a certain point, and then it'll become mandated. I'm hoping that the mandate comes after the crisis and not before.
Okay, I'm going to play a clip right now because I think in the military application of this, so we have a big drone plant under construction and development here in Columbus, going to employ 9,000 people. I mean, it's huge. And the building of homes and everything up in our area of Columbus is just, it's sort of mind blowing. I know it's probably a little bit different than in other parts of the country, but I'm going to play a clip. Before I do that though, Patrick, maybe you can give us some idea. So we haven't touched a lot on technocracy and that type of thing tonight, but I want to bring up, because I do have two clips that we're going to do before we leave tonight. And they're both with guys who are associated with Palantir. So, Patrick, why don't you kind of give us sort of a thumbnail sketch of who Palantir is, where it came from, and who's behind it, and that sort of thing. Because I think it ties into what Pete was just talking about, biometric information, and you can explain all that. Okay?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well,
Take
I
a
just
minute.
happen to have a study on Palantir and Alex Karp and Peter Thiel in my hand right now. I'm writing a book about this topic, so it's fresh in my mind. Basically, Palantir was created by Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, but there was one other co-founder, circa 2000. I think it was 2003 or 4, and their first client was the CIA, and they had their first infusion of money from the CIA as well. The CIA's venture capital firm, In-Q-Tel, dropped angel money, if you will, into Palantir. So Palantir got a start digesting the plans and the architecture that the CIA wanted to put in place in the first place. And they could do that because they outsourced it, if you will. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't legal for them to do those things internally as a government agency. So they gave it to Palantir. Palantir did a great job. I'm saying that sarcastically. So Palantir, under the leadership of Alex Karp and Peter Thiel, has grown up to be the premier source of intelligence, military intelligence, civilian intelligence, you name it, business intelligence. They have all kinds of offerings now where they're using this sophisticated surveillance technology all over the place. So, and the various use cases are, for instance, figuring out targets in Ukraine using their premier software. I think it's called Maven, if I remember correctly, but they have a sophisticated analysis where they can take satellite imagery, social media stuff, any transaction in the country, and they can target people to be eliminated. Well, there's also business cases. Companies like Wendy's, I think they bought into Palantir's software to find out what's how to assess their customer base. Now, the government has just recently given several contracts to Palantir to manage all of the intelligence surrounding the exportation of the data that resulted from Doge. That's what Elon Musk brought in. And his lieutenants came into these agencies and established the data flows into the cloud from like the Department of Treasury and HHS and so on. And so now Palantir has been selected to be the overarching control mechanism to take all that data and make sense out of it. I have to say to weaponize it against the American people, but I won't say it exactly like that, but you get my point. So Palantir and Peter Thiel especially, you have a guy here that's been the chief architect of this technocracy takeover in Washington, D.C. That's my opinion. And I think I can prove that when I write my book, especially. But this guy has a long history. He's a master strategist. He's brought in every conceivable aspect you can imagine into his plan. So there you go. Let's roll your clip, I guess.
Okay. Well, I want to sort of preface that with, some of the things that Palantir is doing. Palantir has been heavily involved in Ukraine, and maybe Britt, you've talked a lot about drones and that type of thing. The one thing that I think we don't get from the Ukraine-Russia war is the massive amount, and Ukraine is vastly outnumbered by Russia, but Russia's making extremely slow advance. I mean, I think somebody projected it out. If they moved at the rate they're moving, they would take over all of Ukraine in about 100 years. It's a pretty slow advance, partly because of the technology that Ukraine has been developing and using, and we've seen some amazing uses of that. But the one thing that Ukraine has developed, I can't remember who I heard say this, that this incredibly valuable asset that Ukraine has developed is real-time digital battlefield data about how soldiers act, react, interact, move, and that type of thing. And so Ukraine is hoovering up that data, processing through AI tools that they've developed, and they're able to change the drones on the fly. So, Britt, what's your comment on that?
Well, I don't have any specifics on that directly, but as we go through these technologies advancing, we're going to see more and more of that. We're going to see AI onboarded onto these drones, learning on the battlefield, adapting on the battlefield. And this is just a constant flywheel of innovation is what we're seeing. So it changes all the time on both sides. Both Russia and Ukraine are adapting. This is why we see this stalemate seemingly in Ukraine. I mean, it's been 3.5 years. And so, I would expect that to continue until eventually one nation or group of nations just has a breakout in the area of drones and drone swarms.
Okay, well, I'm going to play a clip now of Alex Karp. This was earlier this year at the Reagan Defense Forum. I have to find it on here. Give me 1 second. go. Hang on a second here. Let's see. Okay, I think this will work. Here we go.
Dr. Karp, did I see you want to get in
well,
there?
no, just so everyone apologize, the acoustics are weird, so I can't, if I don't address what you said, it's because we can't hear it. But in any case, I as an unhappy Democrat with maybe one rep that I agree with in the whole world besides Senator Fetterman, I don't think these things, the interpretation of these stats is, well, you know, America voted is in contradiction with these stats. I actually don't see it that way. Well, the way I see it is Americans are the most loving, God-fearing, fair, least discriminatory people on the planet. And they want to know that if you're waking up and thinking about harming American citizens, or if American citizens are taken hostage and kept in dungeons, or if you're a foreign power sending fentanyl to poison our people, something really bad is going to happen to you and your friends and your cousins and your bank account and your mistress and whoever was involved. And you know, when Americans are spending $1 trillion on defense, what I want and what I think my peers want is, why are these people keeping our citizens hostage, torturing our people, attacking our allies, maligning us in what was once called the United Nations, basically a discriminatory institution against anything good? We need to stand up, and those people need to be scared. And that's why this conference is so important, because we have the best products in the world, and we cannot have parity. Our adversaries do not have our moral compunction. If it's even, they will take advantage of our niceness, kindness, our desire to be at home in Nebraska or New Hampshire or wherever we live in our peaceful environments. And they need to wake up scared and go to bed scared. And if you give that to the American people will go back and say, and honestly, probably shouldn't say this is why I thought the Democrats were going to lose the election, why they did, because people want to live in peace, they want to go home, they do not want to hear your woke pagan ideology, they want to know they're safe. And safe means that the other person is scared. That's how you make someone safe. And the average American person understands this. Unfortunately, many of the intellectually captured institutions funneled and intellectually owned by the Berkeley faculty do not. And that's what they want. It's sure as hell what I want. And that's what Palantir and all the people in this room, I hope, we're here to serve the American people. And my version of service is the soldiers are happier, the enemies are scared, and Americans go back to enjoying the fact that we're the only one with a real tech scene in this country, and we're going to win everything.
Okay, what do you think?
I think he's right. Most Americans want to be safe. I'd rather be free. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of freedom and liberty erode away, is because people are just allowing this to happen. They're not resisting these things. Yeah, so that's my thoughts.
Others?
This is a very clever ploy to gain sympathy to the audience, for sure, because America was not built on safety. Not at all. The safety of the common good of the people. This is a false construct, in my opinion. And I don't care how sincere he appears talking about, well, this is what the American people want. I'm sorry, it's not what he's not speaking for all Americans, for sure. But he's building this case that his products alone can keep us safe at home if we just give him the reins to surveil everything and everybody in the system nonstop, 24/7. You'll be safe, all right, but you won't be free. You'll be caught like a bug in the bug machine outside the goes zap, zap, zap. And so this is not what we want, folks. It's just not what we want.
But
I
I hate to use the term play devil's advocate when we're having a discussion about Bible prophecy, but I mean, we do. So Pete, you're the military guy. Do you want the other side to fear you that you might have superior weapons or technology? Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't like this, but I feel that this is a massive quandary as we move forward because none of this is stopping. Nobody is shutting this down. I don't see that happening. Maybe somebody will pull the switch someplace. I don't know. But Pete, what do you think about what Alex Karp had to say?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, you can't have security without the measures to implement both the proactive and the reactive constraints surrounding whatever the policy is going to be on that. But it is going to limit liberty. It's going to impose its claws, teeth, whatever, into our freedom that we have here, our constitutional freedom. It has to in order to be implemented. So it doesn't matter, in my opinion, it doesn't matter why some law is passed, like the Patriot Act, for example. It doesn't matter the justification behind it. I mean, I think right now they're going to use whatever incident they have to try and get something passed through. And we are doing exactly what Ben Franklin said not to do. That we are trading our freedom for our security. And it's a slippery slope, double-edged sword, whatever you want to call it. But you can't have one without the other. So we can't be this strong, massive nation if we are not united by some type of a monotheistic. We all believe the same type of thing about everything, about our culture, like a mono. I'm trying to think of the word monotheistic, but it's not monotheistic. But we had a singular culture, and we were all kind of the same kind of people, had the same religion, same history. I think that we wouldn't need the stringence of limiting our freedom clamped on us too tightly because we all kind of want the same thing. We all want to survive and want to thrive as the most powerful nation. But when you have a melting pot like we do, when you have people coming in from every corner of the world and they're bringing in all their own ideas and they're bringing in their own agendas, the only way that we're going to even project strength as a nation and under the system that we have is either under the Constitution, which equal rights under the law, or it's going to be some top-down government-imposed security measures that are now forced on everybody, like everybody having to convert over to CDs from cassette tapes. I mean, it wasn't like anybody held a gun to anybody's head and said, you have to change all your cassette tapes for CDs. And this is dating myself, a couple decades, but it happened because the options ran out. You couldn't buy cassette tapes anymore. You had to buy CDs if you wanted to listen to your favorite band or whatever it is you want to. So I think it's just going to move. It's going to continue to keep moving into that direction where you can't use cash anywhere. And it's already happening in a lot of places that they won't accept cash. And so eventually we'll have to go to credit cards, debit cards, and then every transaction will be monitored and measured. Even though they haven't officially done away with currency, they're going to let the private market dictate those terms of each transaction by their own corporate policies. And the government's going to say, well, look, that's free market capitalism. We're letting the system play out. But that's exactly the system they want to play out. They're encouraging that so that everybody does move off of tangible currencies, fiat or otherwise, and moving it onto some system that they can control and manipulate. I think that's the biggest danger about digital is that you can rewrite, edit, manipulate. If I had $10,000 in my bank account there today, and I say something that's, they don't like this technocracy roundtable, whatever, then tomorrow I go in and there's zero, and I have no recourse other than to pursue it through the bank, which could take weeks and months and who knows how long. And that's where the government has the leverage over, is that they can wait us out. We can't go weeks without groceries or weeks without paying rent or other things. So I think it's going to be forced on. It's increasingly being forced upon us, this change across everything. It's just now that we're starting to see where we're moving in from the strongly recommended to now we're starting to see the mandatory across all the different spectrums, whether we're talking about travel, commerce, national security, all of that. We're transitioning from optional to now it's going to start being mandatory and forced upon us.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, what do you think? Look, I'll be honest with you. Everybody else in the world has technology. How do we defend ourselves? Because that is part of what the government's supposed to do. Go ahead.
So I've come to the conclusion for probably over a year that there's a trap. It's been well designed and planned for decades, and that only the insiders of the world, and this would be the elites and other cohorts, actually have the awareness of the timing of how events are designed to work, and therefore the average person will be trapped. And I don't see that we're going to fight our way out of this type of a problem. I just see that that's why I've been thinking about best practices around what is the church going to say when we start to see elements of the Great Reset and basically the lure of digital currency coming in to rescue people and the consequences of that action. And I've been longing for very strong leaders. I would name several of them that I think most people would agree have a massive following and a lot of influence. And they'll be the ones, I think, that will put the stake in the ground and say, we need to rally. This is our best practices around how we're going to approach the season that we're in. And so I think the average person will, be hurt, honestly. I think that's the goal. And when the elites tell you they're going to do this stuff, in other words, the Great Reset and all the implications for real world asset tokenization, putting things on the blockchain, the ESG, and the other scoring systems of social credit, they're telling you this, they're implementing it. And so at some point you have to scratch your head and say, there's really no way I can properly prepare for this. And so what am I going to do? And that moment of clarity, to me, resolves into do the best that I can, be prepared the best that I can, but be about the Father's business, because we are one day closer to the rescue plan. So I maybe see it differently than others, but just through a lot of reduction and coalescing of these complex problems, I've kind of determined that we need better effort from leaders in the church to be prepared for what we know are coming. I mean, this roundtable has been excellent in terms of foreshadowing or reporting on the foreshadowing that we see. And yet, who is going to stand up? What is the church's best practice position on these things? And this is way bigger than just a influencer talking or a watchman talking. And I think we're at this point where true stand your ground leadership will have to be asserted. And then people will make their decision based on their impression from the Holy Spirit, from their prayer before the throne room. They're going to opt in, they'll opt out. I don't know exactly how it will fall out. This is kind of where my mind, just starts, circling down into a pit of melancholy, because I know I can expect to see how hard this is going to hit people. And sure, wouldn't it be nice if comforting, well-known pastors and leaders would begin to say, hey guys, we're in the last yard. We're in the red zone. We see the finish line coming, and this is what we recommend. But will that happen? That's torturous, because to me, the need is so compelling that somebody needs to stand and at least do a draft of 0.001 in order to begin the ball and the iterations and the improvement as we see more and more things coming and things are getting clearer, guys. I think we could all agree it's getting clearer. And so yet, where is the iteration speed based on what we're witnessing out there in the world and the plans of various entities? Where are we going to give the guidance that I think the body of Christ is so desperately, looking for? And if it's not preemptive, we've made a bad mistake, because when it tips over, the dominoes push. It's too late to go back to a controlled landing in terms of comforting people. And maybe we don't want to hijack Titus 2:13 for sure. We want the Lord to have all the glory and to rescue us, and our hope is in him. And nothing else, nothing we can do should ever substitute for the hope. I think, Britt, you were very wise to bring that up again in tonight's series here. But I do have I don't know, John, I don't know what you think about it, but those are my thoughts.
Scott, I think it's a difficult time. We talk about these things, and I think we probably get criticized for, you're just a bunch of negative and fearful. And I don't live my life like that. Okay. But I do think we need to think through and talk through these issues. And look, my personal assessment is that right now, nothing changing. Here's an example. I could give you 10 examples from this week. Here's one that's at the top of my mind. We have for years expressed concern on the right side of politics in America about China. China is using infiltration techniques they're our enemy. They're not our friend. And then I heard the other day a professor from Liberty University say, we need to make it a world where, China can have its spheres of influence. This is lunacy in my mind. It doesn't make any sense that we do this. On the other token, we say, we don't want Chinese chips on all of our stuff, which I agree with that. We want to root that out. But now we turn around and we're selling NVIDIA chips to China because we're getting a 15% tariff on them. It doesn't make any sense to me. And so my conclusion from this is, you need to think through these things, but I just don't see this being stopped or rolled back. And I know that sounds really negative, but I think it's on a progression. The question is how fast.
John, I think one of the things, look, I know it's negative sometimes, and I like to do our commercial breaks, and we all love to do that for perspective and hope. But the thing is, this prophecy roundtable provides the green room experience. I mean, the way that you've self-described what it is we're doing here, our audience gets to look into how we talk to each other. We're not really talking to the audience right now. We're talking between ourselves, and the way I kind of think of it. And that's why, I think this is very unusual. It's very rare that we do this type of episode. And yes, it's dark sometimes, but the thing is, we're also working out, our thoughts here so that we can best equip the Watchman community, especially in the body of Christ, at a larger level here for what we see coming. So I commend you for this live stream.
Okay. So look, we've been at it for 2 hours and 3 minutes, and I think it's probably time to kind of bring it in for a landing. I do have some clips. I think that either we'll all get together and talk about them, or we'll get together in groups of 2 or 3 and talk about them on other live streams or podcasts. I do have extended clips of Peter Thiel, who's one of the other guys behind Palantir, incredibly influential, talking. He's been talking a lot for months, if you just track him, about the Antichrist in Armageddon. And he claims to be a Christian, although his lifestyle seems to indicate otherwise. So I think we'll save that for a future time. So let's start with Pete, and let's just do a little wrap up of what you want to leave everybody with tonight.
Well, if it's like anything that we go through in our daily lives, we all go through trials and struggles, some more than others. And each time that happens, we just kind of come down to the binary choice of either we let this crisis, this event destroy us, or we let it refine us and make us better because of it. And I think that we all collectively believe that we are the last generation. None of us would probably agree on exactly when that's going to happen, and that's okay. But we can see the writing on the wall, and we can see everything being built before us. And it's everything the Bible's already described, saying this is what the world's going to look like in the end. And so I think the fact that we have this roundtable, that we're addressing these issues in a public format, even though we are talking like we are talking amongst ourselves, I think we have to come down to that decision as a body, a collective body of believers. Do we allow this darkening times to destroy us, to silence us, to shut our voices out, or do we recognize the significance of the times in which we live and rise up like the people that God's called us to be? And I think if you were to take just you pick a denomination, but if you just had that one denomination begin to speak out on an issue across the United States, I think you would start to see traction on a lot of other things, and other churches would begin to stand up. That's the last thing they want the churches to do, is to stand up and take a stand like, we had in California with a lot of the, Jack Hibbs and John MacArthur's churches and other major churches that refused to shut down in 2020. Imagine a whole country full of churches like that say, no, we're not doing that because that's against the Bible. And we're going to protest, but we're going to protest peacefully and legally. And we're going to use the rule of law to try and slow down or thwart whatever these, massive changes that the government's continually trying to push down on the society. But we don't see that. And so what we're left is a remnant of watchmen believers in this community. And we are doing our level best, I think, to reach our family and friends and churches to the point that it's kind of annoying, and it's good. That should be that way, because you know what? When it happens, it'll be that much more obvious and that much more evident to anybody that is left behind that, just like Jesus said in John 10, I think 13, we said that I tell you these things, or 19, I tell you these things beforehand so that when they happen, you'll know. And so we're talking about these things beforehand so that when it happens, people will know that this is exactly what the Bible said all along. And they're not going to be wowed by the supernatural components or the technological components to all the new changes we're seeing about 2030 and everything that's happening between now and 2030. New technologies coming out every day. Everybody's like, whoa, this is amazing. Amazon's got this new wristwatch, whatever thing coming out that basically is your own personal AI agent. It's all this stuff. It's not designed to impress us. We should be pointing at that and saying, look, that's what the Bible said that was going to happen a long time ago. We're seeing this being built right now. And it should be a wake-up call. And I think that as Christians begin to wake up and realize this, they become very vocal. And that's the last thing governments and Satan and his forces want to happen. So I think we need to keep preparing by being bold in our faith, talking about these things, sharing these things with our family, because right now I feel like the only thing that's going to be able to counter the great delusion that's going to come on the backside of the rapture is the fact that we're talking about these things beforehand, and that is where the strength in that is, that the Bible says it's already happened, it's already been predicted, and when it happens, that's only strengthening what the Bible's position is on that. So
okay, let's go to Britt.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say as Christians, we shouldn't be fearful or worried about any of the things we've talked about tonight or any of the other things that we see coming upon the world, there should be two emotions that we should be feeling very strongly right now. One is joy and knowing how close we are to the return of Jesus Christ, how close it is to Jesus coming back for the church. So if you're a born again Christian, if you know him, you should be filled with joy knowing each day we're getting closer to that point in time. Should also be filled with this overwhelming sense of urgency. And so we should be doing what Pete just said, planting seeds, telling people about these signs, telling people what the Bible says. Again, even if people say, I don't want to hear any more of that, that's fine. Plant that seed. When those things happen, those people will remember what was said. And they'll say, they got that from the Bible. Maybe I should read the Bible. So I can imagine that there's going to be quite a few people who become Christians very shortly after the rapture occurs, because they'll know exactly what happened and they'll get their lives to Christ at that moment. So we should be filled with a sense of urgency to plant these seeds and to share the good news of Jesus Christ, that while we were still sinners, Jesus, who lived a perfect life, he died on the cross, he shed his blood and paid the price for our sin. And then he rose in victory over death. Because Jesus he's the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. So it's through Jesus that we're reconciled with God. And that is an invitation that is open to anyone, no matter how fallen they believe they are. We should be sharing that with everybody we can. Make sure that you're telling everybody you know, your coworkers, your neighbors, your friends, your relatives, about the hope that you have in Jesus.
Okay, thanks, Britt. Scott, then Patrick, and then I'll wrap us up.
So I think just share that I talk to a lot of people either on the phone or through correspondence, and what I try to keep in mind is Hebrews 10:25. This is where it says, "Do not abandon meeting together, as is the habit of some people, but encourage one another." And then it says, "All the more as you see the day drawing near." And so one of the things in my keep it simple mode right now is just try to be an encouragement to others, to acknowledge how they are trying to do ministry themselves. I get to see lots of stories. This is what I'm doing with my rapture kit. This is what I'm doing for my letter that I'm leaving for someone that's being that suspect will be left behind. And I want to be a cheerleader in this season. And I think that encouraging one another is not only is it a loving, brotherly, and sisterly thing to do for each other, but there's enough negative, bad stuff. As you guys know, I could see a lot of it already. But my decision when I'm interacting with people, especially one-on-one, is to encourage, to listen and to encourage, and to make sure that they're not breaking fellowship, that they're in community, because I think that the distress that we'll see eventually will need to rely on each other quite a bit. So that is what I would like to leave with us. Encourage one another. We certainly see the day approaching. We've talked about it repeatedly tonight. But our action statement, not seeing that this is an elective right here, this seems like a kind of a command to me. We should lift each other up and help each other to finish well. And that's a theme that I'm trying to really grasp in this season as I see the finish line approaching.
Thank you, Scott. Patrick?
Wow. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I can tell you over the course of my life, I've been a Christian over 45 years at this point. I have so many things that God has done for me, and crises and mountaintops and etc. I can tell you I have a pile or a series of Ebenezer stones or piles that celebrate what he did for me along the way. Based on that, and I realize not everybody here is going to be a Christian for a long time, but I can tell you, God has never been faithless with me. He's always been there for me. He's bailed me out of so many situations. You can't believe it. I'll tell you someday maybe, but you know, has been a continuous flow of grace towards me, my family as well. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I don't care what happens in this world, he is going to be true for me, to me. I can stake my life on that right now as I'm speaking that. I would encourage you to, especially if you're a new Christian at this point, to consider the testimonies of older Christians who've witnessed the goodness of God in their life. He'll never let you down. I don't care what the situation is. I don't care how bad it gets. He will never, ever let you down. If you keep your eyes on him, like the Bible says, he's the author and finisher of our faith. He promised this to us. So that's my exhortation. I'm really glad you're all here. For sure.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Britt, Pete, Patrick, Scott. Let me just make a couple comments. I always feel at the end of these that we've not resolved the issue, and I think the issue is to many extent irresolvable at this point. We know that Jesus is coming back, and we look forward to that, and we look forward to him cleaning up this mess. That the world is a mess. And I personally don't live in fear. I want to be, I think we should all want to be wise people who understand what's happening in the world in instructing, as it says in Daniel, the wise will understand and instruct many. And I think we want to be that. So we have to be in the scripture. We have to be looking at things. And I think it's important that we have discussions like this. I do think that we're sort of, I think back to the pattern of what happened when Jesus came the first time. A lot of people didn't get it. A lot of people did or thought they did, and then they left. And we need to be careful about getting discouraged and sort of drifting away. But I do think we're on the cusp of a lot of things that we will be saying, or someone will be saying, this is that which was prophesied. This is a fulfillment of that which was prophesied. I mean, I think there's so many lines of this that are coming, and I think we need to be aware and sensitive of that and use that as an evangelistic tool. I know you guys get this. I get things all the time from people. Wow, I listened to you and I found the Lord, and I'm not sure how that happens. That's a God thing. And so we are very grateful for those when they happen. Again, thank you for listening to Roundtable. Like, share, subscribe on the different platforms that you're listening to. We'll be doing this again, probably, we try to target it about 5-6 weeks down the road. We'll see what schedules look like. Although I'm thinking with 6 weeks down the road, that's close to when I'm in Israel. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we can do this from Israel. I don't know. But again, thank you so much. Be in prayer for all of us. Be in prayer for each other. Continue to fellowship with each other. Stay in the Word. And thank you. And guys, I'll say goodbye to you. And good night, everyone. Thank you so much for listening.